Me again, Louise Hvala, and I'm back with another episode of Gatehouse Insights. In this episode, I'll be joined by Kemi, who is empowering women to nourish themselves and each other to create lives that make a difference. We'll be speaking about the gift of asking, leadership, and why personal inner work is the most important work we can do. Make sure you subscribe to the Gatehouse Legal Recruitment YouTube channel to catch it all. So I want to begin with how you became immersed in this world of empowering other women. Take me back, where did it all begin?
Where did it all begin? Well, it's interesting actually, it started with food, ironically. So I was teaching women how to create healthy meals to support themselves and their bodies. And then I realised that many women were waiting to lose the 5 kilos before they felt they could start to live their lives. And I just thought there is so much more for women to do on this planet than reach a certain dress size. And so for me, I started to look at how can I create spaces for women to feel their power in other ways. So I started running well-being retreats. So I started with the food, but then slowly started moving from food to kind of energy, to mindset, to empowerment, to leadership. So that's kind of the journey that I've been on.
Yeah. And you've written a book about all about asking questions.
Yes.
Why is it so difficult for women especially to ask more questions?
I think it's women find it difficult to ask for anything, not just questions, just ask for more time, more space. I think most of us are raised to be good, and we're raised to not rock the boat, and we're raised to be available to others, that the idea that to be a good girl or a good woman is to be constantly available to everyone else outside of us. So then the thought of even asking for anything for ourselves is really confronting for many women. And some women are great at asking. I think we're all great at asking in certain areas and then not so great in others. One woman is happy to ask for extra avocado on her toast. And I've met a woman who's actually said to me, I would never do that. You know, as if she would be cast out of the cafe. And I said, why? She said, because that's really greedy. Okay. You know, whereas another woman would happily ask for a raise without even thinking about it. Whereas another woman said, I know that I'm not being paid what I'm worth, but there's no way that I'd ask. I'll wait for them to give it to me. So it's, you know, I don't want to put it like a blanket that all women struggle, but I think we have certain areas where we're stronger and other areas where we don't even know that we can ask for the thing. I think that can be really interesting. People don't even know that you can ask to sit on the arse seat. It's kind of like, well, that's the ticket I've got, even though I'm claustrophobic, squashed between 2 people on a plane. They don't even think that they could even ask because that would put someone out and they don't want the attention put onto them. They don't want to be difficult.
What impact of not asking does it have on us?
It's a massive impact. It has us, and I know this from my own experience and from clients and friends, is that it has us be really resentful and really angry. And we spend a lot of time, we can fall into a victim mentality, that things are happening to us, that we don't have a say. So an example, you know, for professional working women, if they have a partner that isn't doing, you know, the domestic work around the house that they'd like them to, we sit in that space of they should know, why can't they see that it needs to be done, as opposed to actually asking for it to be done. Which brings a lot of clarity because the partner might say no, which is another conversation. But we expect people to know things, and then when they don't do what we thought they were going to do, we're disappointed. So then what can happen is that we have this cycle of disappointment and resentment, and it all comes from not actually declaring what it is that you want in the first place.
How do we get ourselves out of that cycle?
Start with the avocado on toast, I reckon. Start small, work your way up to the raise. I think it depends how. You know, for me, with my work as an executive and personal coach, I'm always working with women around clarity around their asks, but also clarity around what they want in the first place. Because if we spend our lives making sure that everyone else's needs are met, sometimes we're not even clear what our needs are. We're not even clear what we want. We don't know what our goals are, what our desires are. So once we have clarity on that, then it comes down to practice, just practicing the asks. And one of the things that I've written in the book, The Gift of Asking, is, you know, what to do when you get a no. Because we also don't ask because we don't want to be rejected, because we don't want to look stupid, because we don't want it to look like we don't have all the answers, which is a heavy burden to bear, to think that everyone thinks that we have to have all the answers. And so, you know, within this idea of why we ask and why we don't ask, it's always going to take practice.
In terms of the benefits of asking, what are they?
Clarity, and which doesn't always mean that asking is going to make life easier. Sometimes it makes it harder. I had a client that I was working with, a C-suite executive, who asked for a raise, didn't get the raise, but it also then she could choose whether she wanted to stay with that organisation. She felt that her value was not being met through her numeration, and she decided in the end, okay, I'm leaving. But she'd been sat for a year or so hoping that they would tap her on the shoulder. And then she said, actually, I feel like I am due a raise. And they said, we don't. And she said, well, I still do, so I'm going to go somewhere else. So asking doesn't always give us necessarily the answer that we want, but it does give us the clarity to make the next choice, which has us be in the driving seat.
Do you feel like when we do ask, we have more power and more our self-esteem and confidence builds also?
Depends what we're asking for. I think we can ask and our knees can be shaking and we can feel incredibly nauseous and our palms can be sweating. But I do think it builds personal power, and I am very much into this idea of personal power as opposed to external power. So there's an amazing woman called Julia Diamond who speaks a lot about this idea of power, and that there's situational power, and there is societal power, and then there's personal power. And the personal power is the power that we own. So every time we are asking for something that we need or that we want or that we desire, we are building our personal power ask by ask. And it can't be taken away from us in the way that situational or societal power can be taken away from us.
It's interesting. You spoke about being a good girl before, and in your Raw Beauty book, you speak about a concept, the numb, dumb, good girl.
Yes.
Okay, explain a little bit more about this
about
concept.
the numb, dumb and good girl.
Yeah.
Sort of going back to what I've spoken about a little bit, that most of us are raised to be good, you know, and it's funny actually, I have a nearly 13-year-old daughter. I consciously have never told her that she was a good girl. And then the other day she did something, she's 13, and I just went, good girl. She went, what did you just say to me? Because what it does to our girls is it has them, that's what makes them worthy, is if they're good. And so what women tend to do, well, humans, but you know, within my work, I work mainly with women, is that we numb our feelings and our emotions, either with food or with TV or with busyness. That's a big one now, busyness, and now we've got the scrolling. So we're never really present to how we feel about things, which is really helpful if we're just going to be good and not rock the boat. Yeah. So you can kind of just manage your emotions by not really allowing them to surface. So then you can just kind of make your way through life. And I am a proponent of women thriving, not surviving.
How do we shift because we do grow up as young children and even into our teenage years that you're a good girl and well done. How do we shift our mindset when we get into, I suppose, the real world workforce, that it's no longer about being a good girl, but it's more than that? So how do we shift our mindset from that?
Well, in some ways that takes us back to asking. So for asking for what you want, has you not, in your eyes, you may not be a good girl because you're deciding to ask for what it is that you need, maybe to do the best in your job, maybe to, you know, lead your team in the way that they need to be led. A lot of the conversation now is about being 100% human at work. And what does that look like? And I think for women to be able to be complex beings as opposed to this kind of one-dimensional has a huge impact in how the world's decisions are being made, has a huge impact in women being able to step up into leadership. When I speak to audiences, I will ask them, what does leadership look like? And I can guarantee of every single audience I've spoken to in the last couple of years, and I've spoken to different industries within different female leaders within that room, none of them see themselves as leaders. So that was not the image that they were given, that you look like what a leader looks like. So a lot of my work is even just breaking down that unconscious and sometimes conscious bias around what leadership is and who gets to do it. And then once we've done that, it's like, okay, so if you're a leader, how do you get to lead from who you are, from your humanity, from your values, what aligns with you? And then in that, women are building their personal power. We need to collectively use each other and support each other and ask each other. You know, this idea of women helping each other up the ladder, having each other's backs. I love the phrase, a real queen will adjust another queen's crown without telling anyone else. Something I'm sure I've just not done a very good job, but hopefully you get the idea. Yeah. That in some ways we're moving into territory that we've never moved into in the 21st century. And yet it is the time for women to use their voices and to stand in their personal power and lead in the ways that align with who we are.
I'm curious, you said that these women thought leadership, they didn't see themselves as leaders. What did they see as a leader?
Oh, you know, Louise.
Tell
You know
me.
what they saw? They saw white middle-class men.
Okay.
And even I remember I was speaking to a group of doctors, even one of the doctors, and they're female doctors in the room. So when I asked them to close their eyes, and I asked them to say, I said lawyer, professor, doctor, judge. And I asked them not to edit what they saw. So what's the first thing? And one of the women, she was kind of crying, hysterically crying, laughing. She said, I am a doctor and I didn't even see myself. So it's this unconscious imprinted bias. So then if you're always told that's what it looks like and you look nothing like that, that's a lot to break down. Yeah.
Now I wanted to touch on the reasons why people are constantly chasing happiness. So it's almost like once I get that job, then I'll be happy. Once I get the promotion, I'll be happy. Why are people constantly in this state of when I get that next thing, that's when I'm going to be happy?
Oh, I think there's a whole industry that's geared around us thinking that when we get the next thing and the next thing and the next thing, which is why I think the minimalist movement has now come to the fore in a way that it never has before. There's can I think of his name? I can't. He's a doctor in psychology, and he has this idea that happiness comes from striving. And I think that when we realise that happiness is moments, and sometimes those moments link together over a period of time, so you have maybe weeks or a couple of months or maybe a couple of years of happiness, but generally that isn't most people's experience. You have a moment in a day where you feel extreme happiness. This idea that happiness is outside of ourselves, that's where people fall over. Because actually, coming back to personal power, doing the internal work, which is the really hard work, is a really good way of actually gauging what does happiness look like to you. Some people can walk down the street and see a butterfly and that will be the most joyous thing. I'm a butterfly person, so if I see a butterfly I'm like, here you are at last. But some people would never even see that because they're too busy. That's not what happiness looks like to them. So I think we need to sort of work out for us as individuals, what does happiness feel like? This idea that happiness is out there one day when I've earned a certain amount of money to get the car, to get the house, to get the thing, but all the while you're doing that, you're completely exhausted. I'm not sure that's what happiness feels like. So I think it's for each of us individually to work out what does happiness feel like. Same with success. What does it feel like? Sometimes we don't even know what it looks like. We have an idea of what we think society says it is, but that isn't necessarily success for everyone. And so we have to take the time to work out what does happiness feel like for us, what does success look like, and then take the time to do the work.
You mentioned before, internal work is one of the most important things and also one of the hardest things. What should people, I suppose, be doing from an internal point of view to obviously look at happiness and success?
Oh, it's so hard actually. It's not because there isn't a blanket answer to that. I think what I would say is take time. The way that when people go on holidays or if they just go away for the weekend and you get kind of insights into your life or into what's happening in a way that you don't in your day-to-day. So to actually take the time sometimes and to reflect, this is where I am in life right now. Is this where I thought I would be? If not, why not? And is this where I wanted to be? And if the answer is no, what led me here and what am I going to do to move forward? But I don't want to give the impression that that's just kind of like a 10-point quiz that you just do and then by the time you finish the quiz, you're on your way. But to start asking those questions, am I where I want to be? Not just externally, am I in the suburb I want to live? I don't mean that at all. Am I the human being that I want to be on this planet? Am I contributing in the way that I want to be contributing? Am I surrounded by the sorts of people that I feel safe with? Those are the sorts of questions that matter.
Where should they start if they had to start with one thing?
Netflix? No, I'm joking.
There's a documentary on The Minimalist.
Oh, was there?
In Netflix.
That is a great documentary, The Minimalist. They could start there. Where do people start? It's good. I'm a fan of questions. That's my work as a coach. I think one of the questions is, like I've just said, am I where I want to be now? Where do I want to be? And sometimes people don't know, so sometimes that's the question, why don't I know? Why don't I know where I want to be in the future? And to work that out, it does take time. There's a reason why people put on backpacks and go hiking into the wild yonder. or when in our 20s going off to India, whatever the trip is, and it's to literally take yourself out of your life to ask yourself the questions, and they're confronting questions, because if you don't get the answers that you had hoped for, then you've got to do something about it. Because once you know the answer, very few of us can actually just sit and pretend that we don't know anymore, and that's why it becomes confronting.
It is confronting because it could be a whole shift on your career, relationships, where you live.
Yeah, it could be a whole practice of letting go of a lot of things. Yeah.
I want to move on to leadership. And you say that a title of a leader does not mean that you've made it. It's only mean you've just begun.
Yes.
Tell us more.
I feel that as soon as you get the title of a leader, you then have to do your work. Because we all have such great impressions of ourselves in some ways. In certain areas we think, we're the bee's knees. In other areas we undervalue where we have strengths and weaknesses. When you become a leader, all of your qualities are on show to the people that you're leading all the time. And sometimes you're going to get feedback from your team that is not going to be the feedback that you want. It may be confronting to hear, but if you want to lead, you have to be able to meet that feedback in a way that can allow you to nourish your own potential, but also to nourish the potential of your team. So when I say that having the title of leadership means you've just begun, is that now you've begun the work. Now you've begun the internal work of what works about you to lead others and what doesn't work about you to lead others. It takes courage to lead. Yeah.
With feedback from the team, should they be getting direct feedback from the team, or should they be doing something else? How do they improve themselves to be better leaders?
Okay, so one of my things that I'm not a fan of the word should. I feel that, should gives us this idea that people should all over themselves all the time.
Yes.
I don't know if you've heard that.
I read in your book.
Yeah, right. And so it's always a could, because there's freedom. If there's a should, if we say to our children, you should be doing this, especially now that I'm a mother to teenagers, the should, that's not going to, whatever I say, you should do this, it's not going to happen. So it's always a could, it's more of an invitation. So a leader could say to their team, let their team know, I like to receive feedback in this way. How do you like to receive feedback? Because we don't receive feedback in the same ways. Some people like to receive feedback in one lump, so just give it all to me, because generally our brains are always going to listen to the worst and not the best. Some people say, I'll just give it to me in increments so I can sort of build on it as it comes. We shouldn't assume that other people receive feedback in the same way that we do. It's really good to ask.
Yeah. And you speak about the imposter complex. What is it? Tell us more.
What is it? Well, it was discovered in 1978 by two doctors, Dr. Pauline Imus and Suzanne Clance, and they had interviewed 150 high-achieving women. So high-achieving as they had like 17 masters to their names and they were doctors, and yet these women felt like they were a fraud. They felt like one day someone was going to tap them on the shoulder and say, do you know what, we've just figured out that you shouldn't really be here. And what they said, the evaluation said that the imposter syndrome will have you feel like you have been lucky, that it wasn't your work that got you there, it was a fluke, or someone said something nice about you once, and that is it. Not the fact that you have 17 masters and that you deserve to be in the room. So a lot of my work with female leaders is around the imposter syndrome. And what does it look like? One, to feel worthy enough to be let into the room, and then once you're in the room to be sat at the table, what does it take to actually use your voice once you're at the table? And once again, we're not the same, so different female leaders will have different struggles and be confronted at different points of their leadership journey. But it can be, for many, just to get in the room, just to feel that they're worthy to get in the room, because once, as we said, they don't look like what a leader should look like. And then once they're at the table, the idea of being a good girl, now that I'm here, I don't want to rock the boat. Now that I'm here, I don't want to cause any trouble. So it's a very interesting complex to navigate, the imposter syndrome.
As female leaders, how do we push past that imposter syndrome complex?
I don't think there's any pushing past it. I know we live in a world where we kind of want 21 tips to not having the imposter complex anymore. But what I have found for myself, as a woman of colour walking into many rooms of people that don't look like me, is to be able to notice when it's there. So you start to know your language of your imposter, what it looks like, and then instead of making it the truth, which is, I actually don't belong in this room, it becomes, that's my imposter. This is what I do when I'm nervous. That's it. And the awareness just has you to have a different action, because then you can actually counter that with, well, I'm in the room for a reason, so I may as well make the use of being in this room.
for women, because you've touched on it before, about nourishing ourselves to be a better, obviously, leader for our team. Why is that so important?
Funny, there's a great quote actually by Audre Lorde that I read the other day, and she says, self-care is actually an act of political defiance. And for women to lead, if we try and lead in the male paradigm, where it's push, you know, and I think as well that even men know that now that doesn't work. You know, that was the paradigm of leadership. You kind of go hard and you push, and that doesn't work for women. We operate on cycles. We have different energy levels at different times, and we need to honour that. We need to honour that in each other. Many of us have caring responsibilities, not all, but many of us do. And so we need to lead in a way where we are filling our cups so that we can then give to others. And I have to say, I think men need to fill their cups as well so that they can give to others in a more sustainable way. I've heard some wonderful stories now of organisations where the males will stand up and go, I'm going to pick up my daughter from ballet, you know, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so that other males don't have to skulk around pretending they don't have children. And a female CEO who will stand up and say, just to let everyone know, I'm picking up my son from basketball and I'll let you know the results tomorrow. Once again, creating a culture where everyone feels, oh, it's okay to bring my humanity to work. I'm allowed to be a parent. I don't have to pretend that I'm not. So there are changes happening, and it starts with individual leaders being able to stand up and, as I said, lead and own what is unique about them and what's important for them.
How long, or how many more years do you think it's going to take for, I suppose, that shift of it's okay, no one needs to obviously hide around, or they don't have parenting responsibilities?
Yes, I don't know how many years it's going to take, but I do know that it's up to every single individual. And we want it to be outside of ourselves. We want it to be the government or our organisations or the HR department. And actually it's to the individual. It is maybe the woman going and saying, I want to take off, you know, one Friday a month so that I can do the bake sale or whatever the thing is, or the father saying, I want to captain the dance team. Let's mix up the genders. You know, I want to be able to coach the dance team. How can I fit that around my working schedule? I think flexible work has a massive impact on how people can work. But it's us as individuals. How do we lead in ways that show what we value? So if there's another woman that's leaving, instead of giving her the kind of, you know, the one eye, look, I cannot believe she's, to just go, good on you, tell me the scores tomorrow. It's the cultures that we create within our teams that will have this shift. And we are all members of different teams and different communities. And it's the way that we talk to each other about each other that makes a difference. So, you know, I don't know how long it's going to take on the big scheme of things, but I know that I get to choose in every interaction that I'm with, that I can stand up and voice what is of value to me. And I know the more that we all start to do that, we will start, and we are starting to change society and work culture.
Before we wrap up, is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with?
So many things, but I think part of our human conditioning is that we don't feel that we're good enough or that we're ready enough, and that it is really important to step up and throw your hat in the arena anyway, and then once you're in the arena, make sure that one of your superpowers is asking for the support that you need.
And there you have it. Another episode of Gatehouse Insights draws to an end. Thank you for watching, and thank you for sharing this video with your friends. And tune in next time, where I'll be speaking with more incredible people within the profession and beyond.